Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 14th of April 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming out in the show, Civilization Beyond Earth announced, Titanfall DLC is on the way, and Blizzard reveal how they're going to be doing the card expansions for Hearthstone. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. After a couple of days of speculation as to what the new IP that would be announced at PAX would be from Firaxis, it turns out it will be called Civilization Beyond Earth, which is kind of a new IP, I suppose, and will be a space-age 4X civilization-style game set on an alien planet. This will no doubt remind many of you of Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which came out in 1999, but this game contains a number of interesting features as well as maintaining the hex-based mechanics of Civilization 5. Players will be able to seed a planet with a colony ship filled with a variety of different pieces of cargo, as well as the kind of people that you wish to bring, and the kind of planet which you wish to land on, at which point it will be you versus the alien environment before other colony ships land and establish their own civilizations. The tech tree has been described as non-linear and branching, and there will be an affinity system which allows you to sort of create your own ideology based on 3 affinities: purity, harmony, and supremacy, which will cause units to change as well as unlocking various pieces of technology. There will also be an orbital layer added to the game which allows you to launch satellites, which will give you numerous advantages as well as the ability to use them in combat. When asked the obvious question as to whether or not this was basically Alpha Centauri 2, the lead designer Dennis Shirk said that while Alpha Centauri is in our DNA, we also made those games many years ago. They're games we love and that our fans love, but we wanted to approach Beyond Earth in a completely fresh fashion. Both games share some similarities. They're both sim games about sending humanity into space, but in terms of being a strategy game, they don't really have that much in common. We set out to create an entirely new game, and we think a lot of comparisons between this game and Alpha Centauri will be left behind as people see all the things that are coming into play. That's a bit of a shame. Alpha Centauri, yes, one of the most venerated 4X games of all time, and rightfully so. Yeah, we're going to leave that behind. I don't know what it is about developers and wanting to kind of cast aside their past successes and not really capitalize on that. Alpha Centauri had an expansion, but that was it. I mean, you know, Firaxis did not return into space since then, and it has been 15 years since Alpha Centauri. Yeah, it's about time we get an Alpha Centauri too, so it's a bit weird. I guess maybe they just want to say, look, we are capable of making something that is similar thematically, but is modern, it's completely different, it has our own ideas on it. It could be something to do with that. It may just be an ego thing, but whatever the case, it seems to be promising. It certainly looks that way. Obviously, I'm fairly excited to see a Civ-style game go back into space. We have a reasonable number of space-based empire-building 4X games, but we don't have too many that are actually based on planets themselves, so there's a lot of potential here. But I am a little concerned that they will abandon some of the interesting things that came our way as a direct result of Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri had a number of very interesting things indeed, including the ability to design your own units. It wouldn't appear that you necessarily have the ability to do that here. Looks like you'll be able to upgrade them and maybe diversify them, but the full design system that was available in Alpha Centauri does not appear to be there. That's a bit disappointing. I think that with Alien Crossfire, it became very interesting. With the original game, there was a lot of very linear progression. You might as well just upgrade to the next big gun, because they all kind of do the same thing, but the amount of different modules and customizations that were available in Alien Crossfire were pretty fun, and it was nice to be able to design your own unit types to fulfill specific functions, so I'm a little concerned that they will not allow you to do that. The other thing which worries me is the fact that I think Alpha Centauri did a phenomenal job of establishing future lore. Like, basically, it created future history. One of the strengths of Civ is the context. You are building within the context of Earth's history and altering it, but you're constantly having that punctuated alongside technological developments with ancient historical quotes and things like that. Alpha Centauri managed to pull that off with quotes that, of course, weren't real, but they were based around these different faction leaders that all had their very specific ideologies. Some of them were very funny. Some of them really helped set the scene and really explain the tone in this future history idea. And I think that the different personalities on display with the various factions were also very strong. And they had to do that because you know the Mongols are going to be aggressive. You know, that's the way that things go when it comes to Civilization 5. That's very predictable. But what about future organizations, future civilizations, and things like that? You have no idea. Well, they did a really great job of contextualizing all of them and really giving you this impression of how each would act, and they all acted in very different ways and had very unique bonuses. I'm a little worried that they won't be able to pull that off, particularly with the advancement through the game, but they do have a quest system which is supposedly infused with the fiction about the planet, and that will hopefully develop in the same way that Alpha Centauri did, as the planet kind of came to life and really developed, and you had to decide whether or not to do something which would stop that from happening and really hold it back, or try to live in harmony with it. It seems like they've got elements of that. I'm just not 100% sure if they're going to be able to pull that off entirely. I do like the idea of seeding your adventure, as they call it, selecting a cultural identity and leader and sponsor and things like that. I think that will allow you to create those civilizations and those organizations and factions that really made Alpha Centauri special. I'm hoping that that will work out, although I think it could, in the process, lose some of its individuality and some of the personality that those various factions had. So I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I think that the addition of the orbital layer will certainly help. The maps in Civ 5 could definitely get very busy when it came to units, because you couldn't stack units on top of each other anymore. So putting something above that, I think, will be useful to enhance the combat system in some way. And of course, it's a Firaxis game. Most of them are good. As to whether or not this will end up being like Civ 5 in the sense that we have to wait for the expansion for it to not suck, well, I hope that's not true. But I would just like to point out just how cool it is that we have a big resurgence of high-budget, high-fidelity 4X and turn-based strategy games as of late. There are so many coming our way. It's really wonderful for someone that absolutely loves that genre. And certainly a few years ago, we were starved of that. I'm glad that's no longer the case. Civilization Beyond Earth will be released in 2014. Respawn has unveiled the first DLC pack called Expedition for Titanfall. It will feature 3 new maps, and there is also a 2v2 Last Titan Standing mode on the way, which will of course be free, as they previously announced they will not be selling modes. It will also include new burn cards, as well as a supposed hashtag system which will be added to the game, which will somehow allow players with similar interests to play together, although they haven't exactly explained how that's going to work yet. The DLC, of course, will be included in the Season Pass, which is $25, but we don't know exactly how much the DLC will cost on its own. Considering the cost of the pass and the usual number of DLC, it would not be surprising if it was $9.99. The 3 maps will go by the name of Runoff, Swampland, and War Games. So from what we know so far, it's only going to be the maps that will actually cost any money. Things like the hashtag system, the new burn cards, and these other ideas they're exploring, like Titan customization, competitive ranking, as well as so-called rifts, which would change certain modes around. Well, those will be coming in free, which I like. But really, it just feels so unfortunately archaic to release a map pack of all things, and it's potentially risky as well. Titanfall was very successful in terms of its reception from critics, there's no doubt about that, and it sold a lot of Xbox Ones as well. But is it going to stick around long enough? And more to the point, will it cause this big community split problem? As you add more modes, you dilute the existing player base. As you add more maps, you dilute the existing player base. But in the case of paid map packs, you kind of make that even worse because you can split up friends. You know, what if one friend doesn't get the map pack? Well, they can't play with their friends, and that kind of thing happens, which is why, as far as I'm concerned, maps really should always be free. And if you're going to charge for some kind of DLC, then you need to rethink what exactly you're going to be putting in there. This is going to be a fairly unpopular opinion, I think, but honestly, I feel that Gun and Titan DLC would be better than map DLC. But I imagine a lot of you would be concerned about the idea of buying power. I don't blame you in any way, and it seems like a lot of developers are concerned about that as well. Admittedly, Infinity Ward along with Sledgehammer don't seem to give a damn about that anymore, because they're actually selling weapons for Call of Duty Ghosts as part of their $15 DLC map packs. Selling DLC for FPS is difficult, you know, unless you're free to play, where you can kind of get away with this kind of stuff. you end up in a situation where everything you do damns you. You release something like a gun or a different Titan design, people are going to claim you're selling power. You release map packs, you're splitting the community. It's tricky. Maybe the DLC model just doesn't work for FPS. I know, a crazy idea, but it seems like if you're going to release FPS on an annual basis, then really there's nothing to worry about. You don't mind burning your players out quickly. You milk the players you can for double the cost, as you do with a game like either Battlefield or Call of Duty, and then you move on to the next iteration, which comes out the year after that, and the cycle keeps repeating itself, and for the most part, it's been working. So as much as I might have objections to that kind of thing, it still works. It maybe is dying off a little bit when it comes to Call of Duty, but not by much. And they're still able to milk an awful lot of cash out of that for, frankly, content which is certainly not worth the cost. I guess I'm just disappointed that they didn't go in a different direction. That said, I don't know why I'm really surprised. The ex-Infinity Ward folks are very stubborn, and it's no big surprise that they would stick to the more traditional models. I'm at least glad that they're keeping the modes in check and they're not going to be selling those. But, I don't know. I think that they might end up being in a lot of trouble with this, especially considering that it's anecdotal evidence, but a lot of people are saying they're kind of bored of Titanfall right now. They've had their fill of it, and I haven't played it much recently. I put maybe 30 hours into it. I thought, yeah, okay, I've had my money's worth, and I haven't really felt the need to revisit it. I don't think I'd feel the need to revisit it on maps either. The weird thing about putting maps into a game like Titanfall is there's already so many of them. There's 15 maps, or 14, give or take. 3 new maps isn't really going to make too much of a difference. It makes a huge difference when there's not that many to begin with. I guess I just would have liked to see a little bit more creativity, a little bit more industry-leading stuff coming out of these guys, but nope, doesn't seem like we're going to have that. I do wonder what the numbers currently are on Titanfall. It's very difficult to know, of course. There's no official way of tracking it. There's nothing like Steam charts for anything like that. And the last time I played it, I was able to get a game very quickly, no doubt about that, but I would imagine that Titanfall probably has some retention issues. The problem is we don't have any way of quantifying that, so I could be entirely wrong, and this is merely anecdotal evidence. But yeah, again, it's just kind of a shame they decided to go down that route. And finally, a semi-related story, the announcement of the Curse of Naxxramas hit during PAX, which is the first expansion for Hearthstone. They're calling it a Hearthstone adventure, which will introduce so-called Adventure Mode, a PvE mode which involves fighting various bosses from the Naxxramas raid instance. The full expansion will be released in 5 parts, opening wing by wing. The first one, known as the Arachnid Quarter, based of course on the Arachnid Quarter from World of Warcraft, will allow you to unlock 5 new cards, and defeating the end boss at the end of each wing will unlock a guaranteed legendary. They've shown 5 cards already. We don't know whether or not these are going to be the cards that will be available with the Arachnid Quarter, but they're certainly very interesting. The Legendary has a particularly fun effect, Legendary being Baron Rivendare. It has very interesting stats to begin with. It's a 1/7 for 4. There's only one other creature that's like that in the game. His effect is your minions will trigger their death rattles twice, which has all sorts of crazy ideas going with it, and there are a couple of death rattle cards they've already revealed. In fact, this may very well be a death rattle focused expansion that they're doing here. I wouldn't imagine Baron Rivendare would, however, end up being the legendary that came from the Spider Wing. That doesn't seem to fit with the theme too much. Baron Rivendare, of course, is one of the 4 horsemen, which are from the military quarter and not from the Arachnid Quarter. Indeed, it's more likely that we'll end up getting something like a Nubra Khan or Maexner, who are also rather legendary bosses from the game. Each wing will cost a set amount and will be a one-off payment, so you will not have to pay multiple times to run it, and each time you beat a boss, you will gain a card as a permanent unlock. Each of the bosses will have their own unique cards, which you will not be able to unlock, very similar to the way that the tutorial mode works, and they will each have their own unique hero power. Players will also be getting a new game board, as well as so-called class challenges, which claim to unlock new class-specific cards, which is very interesting. I don't know if that is actually new cards, or whether or not it just allows you to get some of the existing ones in an easier fashion. This is going to be also done in adventure mode alongside the existing encounters. And personally, I'm really happy to see this for a number of reasons. One, I love the idea of unique PvE encounters. I think that really spices the game up. And it's also a great way to allow players to earn cards without having to play PvP. I used to play a lot of the World of Warcraft trading card game, and the most enjoyable experiences we had there were the raid decks, which allowed you to cooperate against these raid bosses, which had all sorts of crazy stuff going for them. So that was awesome. I was a really big fan of that. So this is a really nice interpretation of that setup. Secondly, I think this is a really cool way to introduce new cards to the game without just releasing an expansion that you have to buy boosters for. So all of these cards will, of course, be set, so you can acquire them without having to worry about the randomness of the title. And also, if you play Arena, these cards will be available immediately. You don't even have to run the adventure mode in order to get them. So that already adds a little bit of spice to the Arena mode. I'm very happy about that. I think this is a really interesting way of doing it, a very unique way of doing it that has a number of different advantages. And the one-off payment is pretty fair as well. I was a little bit afraid for some of the players that were playing free-to-play that they would have to pay multiple times to run. Thankfully not, but you will have to pay for each individual wing. The idea of a guaranteed legendary at the end of every wing is certainly a nice little carrot to dangle in front of people. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Adding a bunch more legendaries to the game seems a little unnecessary considering there's so many of them anyway, but I don't see the harm in it either. Legendaries are more often than not extremely specific as to what they do, and sometimes they're just not very good. I mean, Baron Rivendare in particular, 1/7 for 4, I mean, that's not brilliant, obviously, on its own. You can get a 1/7 for 4 with a taunt for the same price, and that's a common card. But the Death Rattle effect is very interesting. It also affects only your minions, thankfully. So you can do all sorts of things with that. You can combine it with the new card, the Nerubian Egg. When that dies, it summons a 4/4 Nerubian. I can think of some pretty sick combinations, which involve dropping 2 eggs, Baron Rivendare, and then killing them off with some kind of AoE. That, I think, would be particularly great. I think it also gives Silence a bit more power as well. There's a lot of interesting death rattles and effects that will be dealt with quite nicely by Silence. And there's also a new stealth creature in the form of the Shade of Naxxramas, so that's nice. There's not actually that much stealth in the game at the moment, so it's good to flesh that out just a little bit. I don't really have too many bad things to say about it until I get a chance to try it. It's going to be starting up in summer, then they're going to be releasing the wings one at a time. I'll be diving into that pretty much immediately and maybe making a couple of videos and hopefully taking these cards and making some very interesting gimmick decks out of them. So, yeah, well done to Blizz for coming up with an interesting idea rather than just releasing a new card pack and expecting people to buy it. I do wonder if they're going to keep doing it this way. That seems like an awful lot of work, and it could slow down the progression of the game because the amount of work they have to do in order to release new cards rather than just putting them in a set and making you buy them may very well end up being an unfortunate waste of their time, and that might slow things down, which could bore people, no doubt about that. It's possible that they may decide to do a 2-tier system where they release adventure packs to slowly trickle new cards into the game and provide people with PvE challenges to keep them interested, and then release a big expansion which actually has separate booster packs, the more traditional way of doing things. But introducing cards slower also means it's easier to balance, and hopefully it will prevent a little bit of the power creep and stop them from having to go through a block system like Magic the Gathering has to deal with. So yeah, it looks kind of great. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, but before I go, I would like to give you an OC remix track from their latest album. They've released a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles album, which goes by the name of Shell Shocked, and it's got some incredible tracks on it from some really good artists, including, of course, the Snugglemen, because why the hell not? This is a track from them. It's called Star Turtles 2: The Wrath of Man. It is from the Stage 9 background music, Starbase Where No Turtle Has Gone Before, and the theme of Half Shell. It is pretty rockin', and probably better than anything Michael Bay can come up with, so we will be playing some more tracks from this album over the course of the next couple of weeks. You can get the entire album for free, of course, over on ocremix.org. There is a link in the description below this video. Please use the torrent, help them save a little bit of bandwidth, and, well, save yourself a bit of time as well, because these FLAC albums are pretty big. Really awesome track coming your way, folks. Thank you very much for watching, and a preemptive apology for the next couple of days. I will most likely be out of action. I'm having a procedure done at the hospital. Don't worry, I'm not dead yet. I will be absolutely fine, but it's probably gonna knock me out of action for a couple of days. I'll see you next time.